This is President Joe Biden. Back in 2014, The New Yorker magazine published a story written by Evan Osnos titled The Biden Agenda, which contained the following passage about a meeting between then Vice President Biden and then Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin. To illustrate his emphasis on personality as a factor in foreign affairs, Biden recalled visiting Putin at the Kremlin in 2011. I had an interpreter, and when he was showing me his office, I said, "It's amazing what capitalism will do, won't it? A magnificent office." And he laughed. I'm sure Putin did laugh, because it wasn't from capitalism, it was from corruption. As I turned, I was this close to him. Biden held his hand a few inches from his nose. I said, "Mr. Prime Minister, I'm looking into your eyes, and I don't think you have a soul." Yeah, sure he did. "You said that?" I asked. It sounded like a movie line. "Absolutely, positively," Biden said. And he looked back at me, and he smiled, and he said, "We understand one another." Biden sat back and said, "This is who this guy is." And this has become Joe Biden folklore. I mean, you weren't there, so you can't say it didn't happen, but you can't prove that it did either. Of course, it's not like Joe Biden hasn't made up stories in the past, so let's just take this with a grain of salt. So in March 2021, Good Morning America anchor and former Clinton operative George Stephanopoulos asked old Joe about it.
You said you know he doesn't have a soul.
I did say that to him, yes. And his response was, "We understand one another." I wasn't being a wise guy. I was alone with him in his office. That's how it came about. Look, most important thing dealing with foreign leaders, in my experience, and I've dealt with an awful lot of them over my career, is just know the other guy.
And then insult them to their face. Wow, what a diplomat. That is, of course, if it actually happened. In an interview with NBC News, Putin didn't recall that having taken place.
President Biden says, one time when you met, you were inches away from each other. And he said to you, "I'm looking in your eyes and I can't see a soul." And you said, "We understand each other." Do you remember that exchange?
But I do not remember this particular part of our conversations, to be honest with you. He probably has a good memory.
Oh, sure. Biden's sharp as a tack.
But there's a lot that is happening. I used to always, my friends would kid me.
Anyway, for Keir Simmons to ask Putin whether it happened or not is very telling. Clearly, Simmons doesn't actually believe it. So we'll get back to Putin a little later. Let's talk about Biden's appearance at the G7, where he met with a bunch of world leaders and pretty much accomplished nothing but making himself look like a fool. For example, watch when British Prime Minister Boris Johnson took a moment to introduce some of the world leaders.
And just say how pleased I am to welcome those who have just joined us. Bringing some pretty spectacular weather with them, Prime Minister Modi, President Ramaphosa, President Moon.
So to clarify, Johnson had introduced the Prime Minister of India, the President of South Africa, and the President of South Korea.
And the President of South Africa. And the President of South Africa.
Look how proud Joe Biden is to quickly point out the mistake that Boris Johnson didn't actually make, and then look at Johnson. His face just says it all.
As I said earlier. Oh, you did? I did not. I certainly did.
To be fair, you can't expect Joe Biden to remember something that was said literally seconds ago. Come on, man. So as the G7 summit came to a close, Biden gave a press conference, and like most of his pressers, it was filled with gaffe after gaffe. First, he talked about providing millions of doses of the COVID vaccine to countries in need.
And I committed that we would provide a half a billion beyond the 80 million we've already done, 500 million doses of Pfizer vaccine, which we contracted to pay for. In addition to money we put into the COVID project, which is that COVID is, I know you all know, but a lot of people may not know what COVID is.
COVID, yeah, never heard of it.
By harassing the full potential those who are harassing.
What?
We're going to have to change things. That's the whole idea. But here's the deal.
Seriously, what is the deal?
And so there's a lot going on where we could work together with Russia. For example, in Libya, we should be opening up the passes to be able to go through and provide food assistance and vital assistance to a population that's in real trouble.
Okay, so the Russians are in cahoots with the Syrian government, not the Libyans. But Syria, Libya, same difference.
But they have also bitten off some real problems they're going to have trouble chewing on. And for example, the rebuilding of Syria, of Libya, they're there.
Oh man, for a brief second he had it, and then he blew it by thinking he needed to correct himself. God bless him.
So I'm hopeful that we can find an accommodation where we can save the lives of people for example, in Libya.
So within a minute and 25 seconds, Joe Biden confused Syria with Libya 3 times.
He probably has a good memory.
Speaking of Putin, he agreed to meet with Biden at a summit in Geneva, and there was a lot to talk about, including Syria, again, not Libya, Ukraine, Belarus, nuclear arms, human rights issues, and what is easily the most important thing on the agenda, the recent ransomware attacks from cyber hacker groups based in Russia. So there's a lot to address. And it wasn't a surprise when it was announced that Biden and Putin would not hold a joint press conference after the meeting, because let's face it, it would not go well for one of them.
So the bottom line is that I think the best way to deal with this is for he and I to meet, he and I to have our discussion. I know you don't doubt that I'll be very straightforward with him about our concerns. And I will make clear my view of how that meeting turned out, and he'll make clear how from his perspective, how it turned out.
What is this, Rashomon?
He can say what he said the meeting was about, and I will say what I think the meeting was about. That's how I'm going to handle it.
The best way to counter 2 conflicting narratives would be to hold a joint press conference so that Biden could call Putin out on any disinformation, but clearly Biden's staff knows that he wouldn't be able to handle it, so scratch that, I guess. And that brings us to the million-dollar question. How would this summit go? During the 2020 campaign, there was a lot of tough talk from Biden, who famously called Putin a KGB thug, and you may remember that Biden accused Trump of being Putin's puppet.
The fact is that I've gone head to head with Putin and made it clear to him we're not going to take any of his stuff. He's Putin's puppy.
Oh right, Putin's puppy. My mistake. And then 2 months after being sworn in during that ABC News interview in March, George Stephanopoulos asked Joe Biden the following.
So you know Vladimir Putin, you think he's a killer?
Mm-hmm, I do.
But then at a NATO press conference, a reporter followed up, asking if Biden still felt that way.
In a weekend interview, Vladimir Putin laughed at the suggestion that you had called him a killer. Is that still your belief, sir, that he is a killer?
Answer the first question? I'm laughing too.
It's a yes or no question, Joe.
Well, look, I mean, he has made clear that the answer is, I believe he has in the past essentially acknowledged that he was, there are certain things that he would do or did do. But look, when I was asked that question on air, I answered it honestly. But it's not much of I don't think it matters a whole lot in terms of this next meeting we're about to have.
Gee, I wonder what happened to tough guy Joe Biden.
What happened? Your balls drop off?
Apparently, because after the summit, Putin gave his press conference and said the following.
And then as for the improper statements, well, we all know about those statements. After that, President Biden called me and we cleared things up. And his explanation was good enough for me.
So Biden's tough talk was all bluster. I know you're shocked. And as a prime example, here's a moment from Joe Biden's press conference after the summit.
Another area we spent a great deal of time on was cyber and cybersecurity. I talked about the proposition that certain critical infrastructure should be off limits to attack, period, by cyber or any other means. I gave them a list.
So instead of telling Putin that if there were any future cyber attacks on the US that we would retaliate, he gave them a list of the most important targets.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't have it in front of me, 16 specific entities. 16 defined as critical infrastructure under US policy, from the energy sector to our water systems.
Oh, I'm so sure that they're going to abide by that list. Anyway, the summit was nearly overshadowed by this exchange between Biden and a CNN reporter.
Why are you so confident he'll change his behavior, Mr. President?
Yeah, I'm not confident in changing behavior. What the hell? What do you do all the time? So when did I say I was confident?
You said in the next 6 months you'll be able to determine.
What I said was, let's get it straight. I said what will change their behavior is that the rest of the world reacts to them and it diminishes their standing in the world.
The president attacking the press? Wow, I thought you people voted for Biden to return to normalcy or something. So ultimately, nothing was accomplished or settled at the summit, which CNN's Caitlin Collins dared to point out.
But given his past behavior has not changed, and in that press conference after sitting down with you for several hours, he denied any involvement in cyber attacks, he downplayed human rights abuses, he even refused to say Alexei Navalny's name. So how does that account to a constructive meeting as President Putin?
You don't understand that, you're in the wrong business.
It's a summit with China.
Now she understands, and so do we. The Biden summit was just a big photo op for Biden to try and show that he's a formidable world leader. But the fact is, we weren't buying it before, and we sure aren't buying it now. And on that note, that's it for the moment. Be sure to like and subscribe, and hope to see you next time. If there is a next time.